You know, it's crazy, man. We live in a world where you can hop on a giant metal bird and fly across the entire planet. It's insane! And for the most part, it's incredibly safe. But when something goes wrong up there at 30,000 feet, it can go really, really wrong. We're talking about metal fatigue, human error, crazy weather, and sometimes even straight-up malicious intent. So buckle up, folks, because we're about to dive deep into the 10 most terrifying air accidents in history. We're talking about the crashes, the explosions, the hijackings, the whole 9 yards. So, let's get into it. Man, where do you even begin with 9/11? It's one of those events that's seared into everyone's memory. The world just stopped. It was a gut punch, like someone ripped the rug out from under us. 4 planes became weapons of terror. American Airlines Flight 11, United Airlines Flight 175, American Airlines Flight 77, and United Airlines Flight 93. The images of the Twin Towers collapsing, the Pentagon in flames, the smoldering wreckage in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, they're forever burned into our collective consciousness. The immediate aftermath of 9/11 was chaos. Airports were shut down, flights were grounded, and the world held its breath. The TSA was created just 2 months later. Remember those long lines, the pat-downs, the shoe removal? The attacks forced a complete overhaul of airport security protocols. New technologies like full-body scanners and reinforced cockpit doors became standard. Air marshals were deployed on flights. The world of aviation was forever changed. Alright, so we're going back to 1974, a time when disco was king and bell-bottoms roamed the earth. Turkish Airlines Flight 981 was cruising at 35,000 feet when disaster struck. This was a mechanical failure, a design flaw in the McDonnell Douglas DC-10. The poorly designed cargo door could blow open mid-flight if not secured properly. And that's exactly what happened on Flight 981. The improperly secured cargo door blew open. Now imagine you're on this plane. 1 minute you're cruising along, sipping your coffee, the next minute, bam! The floor beneath you buckles, and the air turns to mist as oxygen masks drop from the ceiling. The force of the decompression ripped a 6-foot hole in the fuselage. The pilots fought valiantly to regain control, but the plane slammed into the Ermenonville forest. The crash of Turkish Airlines Flight 981 sent shockwaves through the aviation world. This one, man, it's about United Airlines Flight 232, July 19, 1989. This DC-10, it was cruising at 35,000 feet when all hell broke loose. The tail-mounted engine, the number 2 engine, it basically exploded. I mean, we're talking catastrophic failure here. Shrapnel, it ripped through the tail, sliced through critical hydraulic lines. It's insane. Now you gotta understand, those hydraulic systems, they're the lifeblood of the plane, man. They control everything. The rudder, the ailerons, the elevators, everything you need to fly that thing. And with this damage, the pilots, they lost all hydraulic pressure. Imagine that, you're up there, thousands of feet in the air, and you lose all control. It's every pilot's worst nightmare. And these guys, they're facing it head on. Now here's where it gets really wild. The captain, Al Haynes, and his crew, they were incredible. They're dealing with this completely uncontrollable aircraft, and they don't give up. They're trying everything they can to regain some semblance of control. They figure out they can use the throttles, the engines, to try and steer the plane. Can you imagine? Trying to maneuver a massive aircraft using only the engine power? It's insane. It's like trying to drive your car with the gas pedal and the emergency brake. They managed to limp that plane all the way to Sioux City, Iowa. It was an incredible feat of airmanship. They fought tooth and nail to save those people. Now, tragically, 111 souls were lost in the crash, but 185 people survived. The investigation, it led to major changes in pilot training, new regulations, the whole 9 yards. They learned a lot from this tragedy, and it made aviation safer for everyone. This one, man, it's dark. December 21st, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103, a Boeing 747. It takes off from Heathrow Airport in London, headed for New York City. It's the holiday season. People are excited to see their families, you know, the whole deal. But high above Lockerbie, Scotland, tragedy struck. A bomb hidden in the cargo hold, it detonates. It just rips the plane apart in midair. all 259 people on board, they're gone. Just like that. And 11 people on the ground in Lockerbie, they were also killed when the wreckage came crashing down. It was a horrific act of terrorism. The investigation, it was massive. It was international. They were determined to find out who was responsible for this. And they did. It took years, but they eventually tracked it back to Libyan intelligence operatives. This event, it sent shockwaves through the world, man. It showed just how vulnerable we are to terrorism, even in the skies. The world, it changed after Lockerbie. Airports, they ramped up security measures like crazy. New screening technologies, baggage checks, you name it. They were determined to prevent something like this from ever happening again. The bombing of Pan Am 103, it's a stark reminder of the human cost of hatred and violence. It's a reminder that we have to be vigilant, man, and we have to keep fighting for peace. This one, man, it's a real head-scratcher. July 17, 2014. Malaysia Airlines flight MH17, a Boeing 777, it's cruising at 33,000 feet over eastern Ukraine. Now, this is a significant detail because this region, it's a hotbed of conflict. There's a war going on between Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian separatists, and out of nowhere, the plane just disappears from radar. It's gone. Later, they find the wreckage scattered across a large area. All 298 people on board, they're dead. It's a tragedy, no doubt about it. Now the big question is, what the hell happened? Was it an accident? Was it shot down? And if so, who did it? It became a huge international incident. Investigations, they pointed the finger at a Russian-made Buk missile system. They believe it was fired from territory controlled by the separatists. Russia, of course, they denied any involvement, but the evidence, it was pretty damning. This event, it really highlighted the dangers of modern warfare, man. We're talking about sophisticated weapon systems in the hands of groups that aren't always known for their restraint. It's a recipe for disaster. And the families of those lost on MH17, they're still searching for answers, man. They deserve justice. This event, it's a tragic reminder of the human cost of conflict and the need for peace. So, this one is heavy, man. Germanwings Flight 9525 from Barcelona to Dusseldorf. March 24, 2015, it crashes into the French Alps. Disintegrated. The black box recordings come out, and it's a game changer. The co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz, deliberately crashed the plane. A horrific act, a betrayal of trust on an unimaginable scale. So what happened after this tragedy? Well, the aviation industry had to react, right? They couldn't just ignore something like this, and they didn't. They implemented some serious changes, particularly when it comes to pilot mental health. First off, they made the psychological evaluations for pilots way more stringent. I'm talking about in-depth screenings, regular checkups, the whole 9 yards. They want to catch any potential red flags early on. And it's not just about identifying problems, it's also about providing support. They've made it easier for pilots to seek help without fear of losing their jobs. There's less stigma around mental health now, which is huge. You can't expect people to come forward if they're afraid of the consequences. The Germanwings Flight 9525 crash, as horrific as it was, forced the aviation industry to confront a really uncomfortable truth. They needed to take pilot mental health seriously. It's a wake-up call that's hopefully made flying safer for everyone. Alright, so we're going back to 1985, June 23rd to be exact. Air India Flight 182, a Boeing 747, is cruising at 31,000 feet. It's on its way from Montreal to London, with a stopover in Delhi. It's a beautiful day, or so they thought. Suddenly a bomb explodes in the cargo hold. The explosion is so powerful that it rips the plane apart in mid-air. Just imagine that for a second. You're up there, cruising along, and then boom, it's over. 329 people were killed in that bombing. Men, women, children. It was the deadliest act of aviation terrorism at the time, and it wasn't just a random act of violence either. This was a targeted attack orchestrated by Sikh extremists who were seeking revenge for a raid on the Golden Temple in Amritsar the previous year. This bombing sent shockwaves around the world. It was a stark reminder that terrorism could strike anywhere, anytime, and it exposed some serious vulnerabilities in airport security. After the Air India bombing, the world knew things had to change. Airport security, especially when it came to international flights, was clearly not up to par. They needed a serious overhaul, so what did they do? They stepped up their game big time. They introduced new technologies like X-ray machines and metal detectors to screen passengers and luggage more effectively. I mean, before this, security was pretty lax. They also implemented stricter baggage checks and increased security personnel at airports. They weren't messing around anymore. The idea was to make it as difficult as possible for anyone to smuggle explosives onto an aircraft. And you know what? It worked. The Air India Flight 182 bombing was a turning point in aviation security. It forced the industry to take a hard look at its vulnerabilities and implement measures that, for the most part, have prevented another tragedy of this scale. This one's a tough one, folks. American Airlines Flight 191, May 25, 1979, a DC-10 taking off from O'Hare Airport in Chicago. It's a busy day, planes coming and going, people starting their travels. But this flight, it wouldn't make it very far. Just seconds after lifting off, something goes catastrophically wrong. The left engine, it literally breaks off the wing. I'm not talking about some small malfunction here. The entire engine separates and goes flying through the air. Now, you can imagine the chaos in the cockpit. The pilots are fighting for control, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. But the damage is too severe. The plane, it's now uncontrollable. It rolls to the left, stalls, and crashes into a field just a couple of miles from the airport. Everyone on board, all 271 souls, they're gone. It was the deadliest aviation accident on US soil at the time. So, the investigation into Flight 191, it was intense. Everyone wanted to know how the hell an engine could just fall off a plane like that, and they found their answer. Turns out, it wasn't just bad luck. It was a combination of factors. First, there was a design flaw in the DC-10's engine mounting system. Then, you had improper maintenance procedures by American Airlines. They were basically cutting corners, rushing things, and that's a recipe for disaster when you're talking about airplanes. The investigation led to some major changes in the aviation industry. The DC-10's design was modified, maintenance procedures were overhauled, and the Federal Aviation Administration, they stepped up their oversight. They realized that they needed to be more proactive, more vigilant, to prevent something like this from ever happening again. It was a wake-up call that safety had to be the absolute top priority. All right, folks, buckle up for this one. It's August 12, 1985. Japan Airlines Flight 123, a Boeing 747, is cruising from Tokyo to Osaka. Just 12 minutes into the flight, something goes catastrophically wrong. We're talking about a sudden explosive decompression. The rear pressure bulkhead blows out. This rips off a huge chunk of the tail fin, takes out the hydraulic systems, and severs control cables. The pilots are dealing with a nightmare scenario. The plane eventually crashes into Mount Takamagahara. It's a tragedy, man. This crash, man, it sent shockwaves through Japan and the aviation world. It remains the deadliest single aircraft accident in history. The investigation revealed a horrifying truth. The bulkhead that blew out had been improperly repaired years earlier after a tail strike incident. Turns out, a single rivet was not installed correctly. One tiny mistake, and you have this massive disaster. It's a stark reminder that even the smallest details matter when it comes to aircraft maintenance. The crash of Flight 123 led to major changes in the industry. Airlines around the world reviewed their maintenance procedures, and there was a big push to improve communication and training. It was all about learning from this tragedy and making sure something like it never happened again. This incident, it highlights the incredible responsibility that comes with building and maintaining these flying machines. It's a responsibility that can't be taken lightly because, as we've seen, the consequences can be absolutely devastating. This one, man, it's a real head-scratcher. June 1st, 2009, Air France Flight 447 takes off from Rio de Janeiro, headed for Paris. On board, 228 souls, just going about their lives, completely unaware of the nightmare that's about to unfold. The flight is smooth sailing for the first few hours. Then bam, it enters a massive thunderstorm over the Atlantic. These aren't your average thunderstorms though. We're talking intense turbulence, lightning, the whole shebang. Now, here's where things get really strange. The pilots send out a few automated messages indicating electrical failures. Then, silence. Complete radio silence. Air France 447 vanished without a trace. It's a mystery that captivated the world. Search and rescue teams scoured the ocean for any sign of the plane. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. It was like the plane just disappeared into thin air. After 2 years of deep-sea searching, they found the wreckage of Air France 447. The black boxes were still intact. They hold all the secrets. The plane's pitot tubes iced over in the storm. This gave the autopilot faulty readings, and it disengaged. The pilots got confused and reacted incorrectly. The plane went into a stall at 38,000 feet. This led to major changes in pilot training. So there you have it, folks. 9 of the most terrifying air accidents in history. Japan Airlines Flight 123, a stark reminder that even the smallest mistakes in aviation can have catastrophic consequences. These stories, man, they're not just about tragedy. They're about lessons learned. These incidents have ultimately made air travel the safest mode of transportation on the planet. We honor the lives lost and keep striving to make the skies safer for everyone.